been living in the Peruvian Amazon as a student of vegetalismo in the Shipibo tradition. I struggled as far back as I can remember with suicidal ideation, suicidal attempts, anxiety, major depression, and problematic substance use, primarily alcohol, cocaine, and opiates for about 16 years. If we actually really take a look at the lives of people who struggle with problematic substance use disorders, or gambling, sex addiction, food addiction, there can be so many different ways that it manifests. If we really take a close look at that, somewhere there's pain. My name is Sapha. I'm 38 years old. I'm in recovery from problematic substance use and major depressive disorder. And I've been living in the Peruvian Amazon as a student of vegetalismo in the Shipibo tradition at Niue Rao Centro Espiritual for 3 years.
What was life like before plant medicine?
Well, life before plant medicine was extremely complicated. I struggled as far back as I can remember with suicidal ideation, suicidal attempts, anxiety, major depression, and problematic substance use, primarily alcohol, cocaine, and opiates for about 16 years. And so life was challenging. Life was really challenging. I definitely had my fair share of plant medicine experiences in my teenage years and in my early adult life throughout my period of problem substance use. However, it was often in conjunction with other substances like alcohol, cocaine, things like that. So it was never, for the healing aspect or the spiritual aspect. It was almost kind of like, I had a polysubstance use disorder, and sometimes that meant I took psychedelics along with other harmful substances.
And how deep were you into the addiction? What was it like?
Yeah, I'm starting to change my language around substance use and less using addiction or the disease model of so-called addiction, and focusing on it more as, or approaching it more as, problematic substance use disorder, and acknowledging that it's actually more of a spectrum than a disease. And so for myself, I took it as far as you can go when it comes to using substances like cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, fentanyl, alcohol. 16 years of that use. I would say about the last 4 years where it was intravenous. I had it all, lost it all. I had a 12-year career on the in the oil and gas industry, drilling for oil on conventional telescopic drilling rigs all throughout Alberta and northern British Columbia. And, high paid, high risk lifestyle. And how I coped was hardcore substance use.
Can you talk about what made you start to distance yourself from that lifestyle?
Yeah, what made me distance myself from that lifestyle was I kind of came to the conclusion that if I ever wanted to be happy, I needed to stop drinking alcohol and using the substances that I was using. And I needed to find a way to promote long-term health and long-term well-being for myself. And so an accidental psychedelic experience actually led me to the realization that I needed to seek professional treatment. And I was fortunate enough to attend a holistic recovery center in Saskatchewan, where I started learning about why I use substances the way I use substances, and started getting deeper into the trauma work and deeper into understanding where these problems stem from, and kind of getting into the root of the trauma. And from there, it empowered me to continue to explore psychedelic psychotherapy. I worked with a number of therapists and different modalities and different medicines over the years. And it ultimately led me to discover working with ayahuasca and the Shipibo tradition. And from there, it just evolved into where I am now and the work that I am currently doing.
In your experience, is there a relationship between trauma and substance use?
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. I think this is one of the important factors of talking about, what's referred to as addiction in the medical community as spectrum use disorder, substance use, and problematic behavior kind of go hand in hand with trauma. And, what we do as people with problematic substance use disorders is we're looking for a way to regulate our nervous system. And a dysregulated nervous system actually comes from experiencing trauma in our childhood, in our youth, in our adult lives. And so, rather than this being some kind of disease that we inherit from family or that we, have a predisposition for genetically, if we actually really take a look at the lives of people who struggle with problematic substance use disorders, or gambling, sex addiction, food addiction, there can be so many different ways that it manifests. If we really take a close look at that, somewhere there's pain, and so turning to these problematic behaviors and oftentimes, substance use, people generally seem to go towards substances that kill pain: alcohol, cocaine, opiates, different prescription medications. Like, if we really look at the definition of a narcotic, it's something that induces sleep. And so what people are working to do in their use is find a way to, escape the pain. And then, due to the properties of some of these substances, opioids, for an example, there's a physiological response to taking the substance where we actually become physically dependent on using these substances. And when we try to stop using them, we become sick, thus leading to the cycle of repeated and prolonged use.
So what led you to ayahuasca?
Yeah, so what brought me to ayahuasca was I was about 3 years into my process of recovering from my substance use. And, at the 3-year mark of complete abstinence from alcohol, cocaine, and opiates, I had begun to work with psychedelics in a therapeutic way with the guidance of a psychedelic therapist on Vancouver Island. But something was kind of missing, and in the recovery fellowships that I was a part of, psychedelic use was definitely forbidden. When I came out about my use of psychedelics, I was like ostracized from my community and the 12-step fellowships. And so I went to ayahuasca, kind of as a last hope, actually. I was struggling with a couple of different chronic pain conditions. I was still really struggling with depression. And when I found ayahuasca, I found community, and I found other people who were working towards finding peace within themselves, finding healing physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And when I began to participate in ceremonies, so much of my life improved and got better. And I really fell in love with the circle aspect of it, sitting in community, doing it as a group. There was just something so profound about it. And I really began to watch my life change. So I spent 3 years drinking ayahuasca in Canada with a therapist at the time. And that eventually led me to, want to pursue just a deeper understanding, a more formal education in a traditional sense. I was in university studying social work at the time, and I expressed my interest of going to the Amazon with some of my professors, and they were really encouraging and supportive and said, go and study and learn. And, I came here thinking maybe I would be here for a year, and 3 years later, I'm still here. And in that process, I have been able to develop and build an amazing community of people with lived experience, medical professionals, psychologists, psychotherapists, many of them in recovery from substance use disorders themselves, and all of them who participate in ayahuasca ceremonies. And then I started bringing guests down here to work with, in a recovery kind of way, inpatient model of treatment, and incorporating the Shipibo teachings, incorporating the Shipibo perspectives on substance use and why it manifests from trauma, somatic experiencing work, physical exercise, holistic nutrition, and just being an equal, having guests come here and, there's no hierarchy. I'm just a guy, trying to find a way to heal and get well and share my experience with other people.
You made a really important point there, and you are making a very important point, the importance of community. Have you heard of the rat cocaine experiments?
I have, yeah, I'm really familiar. Yeah, it's pretty amazing and interesting, and it doesn't surprise me at all, actually.
Yeah, just for people who haven't heard of that, uh, there's an experiment that was done, I don't know when, where there was two cages of rats, and they both had their water bottles with cocaine in them, and then just regular water. And one of the cages had nothing in it, and the other cage was like a rat park.
Yeah.
And the rat park, that cage, the rats eventually stopped drinking the cocaine water on their
Totally.
own, and just started participating in community. I mean, you mentioned all of these things that you're putting together, and from your observations, how important have all these activities that surround the ayahuasca experience been?
It's essential. It's essential, and just like the Rat Project, it's funny because, in the beginning of doing this work, there were so many things that came together for me: the physical exercise, learning about nutrition, learning about mental health, learning about my nervous system, working with medicine in a very practical way where the experience, kind of shows you aspects of your life or certain behaviors, things that you want to change. And it kind of gives you this ability to meet yourself with compassion. And then from there, come up with practical solutions to move forward in your life, also known as integration. And so part of the integrative process is asking people, like, what do you want? What do you really want to do? Do you want to work on your creativity? Do you want to work on your mobility? Do you want to build muscle? Do you want to lose fat? What is it that you want to do? And so by creating a space that offers access to all of these different things, we give people the ability to actually pursue it and build it into their life so that when they complete their treatment program, it's just part of who they are, living healthier, better, more productive lives. The benefits of physical exercise, on promoting mental health and mental well-being, we all are aware of that. And so, yeah, it's had a profound effect. And my experience with drinking ayahuasca is that it just wants me to be the healthiest version of myself possible. And so far, that's been my experience with guests and participants that I've worked with. I've had 14 inpatient guests come and work with me here in the Amazon over the last 2 years, from anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months, actually. And they're all doing amazing, finding themselves back home, North America, United Kingdom, United States, wherever they might be, Canada especially. And yeah, the process is just that: work with medicine, community, physical exercise, somatic experiencing, other therapeutic modalities, and then kind of people just begin to find themselves and find their purpose and find inner peace.
Can you talk about a challenge that you've had with a guest and how you help them overcome it?
Yeah. I mean, there's been a couple examples. I'm very thorough in my screening process. It's very hard to get into the program here. It's going to be even harder to get into the program in Canada. The main thing is that although psychedelic psychotherapy and ayahuasca assisted therapy is part of the program, it's not all of the program. It takes up about maybe 5 to 10% of the program curriculum. And so, people really need to express a willingness and a desire to engage in this work. There's a level of commitment that I show up with and an investment of my time and my energy where I like to be certain that this is what somebody intends to do. So, there's people who, it's all common. I've been doing family interventions for about 9 years now and, setting people up to get ready to go to treatment. And I would say 1 out of every 20 people who get in touch with me make the commitment to go to treatment, and then 1 out of every 30 actually walk through the doors, whether it be here or whether it be at a treatment center in Canada. People get cold feet, shit starts to get real, pardon my language, and people go, oh my God, like, I don't know if I'm ready for this, because they're so used to the comfort of being numb and stuck in whatever their pattern is, right? So, one example was I had a nice guy come down here from the States, and, he got here, he wasn't honest about detoxing from his prescribed stimulant. I think it was Vyvanse. And so that's a contraindicative medicine. You can't drink ayahuasca and have that medication in your system, or it could lead to serotonin syndrome or other complications. So, I was like, hey, you're going to have to wait. You're going to have to be patient. We're going to have to slowly go through the withdrawal process here, which is a tough place to be, to come off of any substance. It's hot, humid, no air conditioning. And so they wanted to leave. They were like, I don't know if I can be here. I think I need to go. And I mean, it might be kind of controversial what I'm about to say, but once you're here and you're in the middle of the jungle and you're an hour away from the nearest city and airport, I kind of just laughed and was like, well, where are you going to go? In a kind and compassionate way, and to be encouraging, just to kind of remind this person why they came here. And the intention of their focus and their work was to come and get well. And we spent many weeks on the phone talking about it. And so they get here, they realize, oh my God, like now I have to withdraw from this medication. I've consulted with the physicians who are on our board. They said that it would be fine, allow them to slowly taper off. Within a few days, they'll be stable again. It's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. And then within a week or two, they'll be able to participate in ceremony. So that was essentially the process that we went through with this person. And, he had a really good experience while he was here. And, that's one example of difficulty. Another example of difficulty, I refer to it as post-shamanic stress disorder, where people come in, they have these really big psychedelic experiences. It can be really scary. You can have all kinds of stuff come up in that visionary state. We open these portals and these other realms to these unseen worlds, and it can be scary. You can see some really dark things. And not to get too much into the Shipibo cosmology, but in their cosmology, these entities and these beings that manifest as these, different characters, devils, wolves, angry dogs, skeletons, zombies, whatever, dragons, as some examples. You see these things when you drink ayahuasca, and I've come to realize often they're manifestations or characterizations of our own shadow and our own trauma. So people get into the ceremony experience and they go, oh my God, like there was this angry devil, eating my feet, and I'm really scared, and I don't want to see that type of stuff. And then they become almost scared to participate in ceremony further, or they become obsessed with it. I've seen that too, where people become obsessed with the darkness and wondering where it's from and looking for some outside source, like it's being sent to them from another shaman, or it's being sent to them from some other realm. There's no way to prove any of it. And so the way that we approach it is, these are aspects and shadows of ourselves. This is a manifestation of our anger. This is a manifestation of our grief, of our, vengefulness, our depression, whatever it might be. And, help people get back to that, and approach it without fear, and approach it with complete surrender and willingness.
Was it difficult for you in your early days of drinking ayahuasca, getting to know the medicine?
Yeah, definitely. I was a skeptic, right? So like when I first started drinking ayahuasca, there was this part of me that just didn't really believe in any of it. The idea of like talking to plants and communicating with plants, and that these plants have spirits. It was a real learning curve for me, because my practical mind is like, it's a psychedelic, you drink it, there's like a neurological effect, there's, physiological effects. You essentially are in an altered state. And outside of that, there's nothing really more to it. And as my experiences developed and I matured in my ability to work with the medicine, I realized through the dieta that, yeah, these plants have a consciousness. They are a channel to communicate, with our higher selves, with the spirit world, with nature. And I really began to embrace that, actually, and learn how I could use these experiences to help myself get well. So that was my experience with that. But in the beginning, it was hard. Most ceremonies for my first 2 years of drinking ayahuasca, I had to ask for help. I would be scared. I would feel like I was maybe going to have a heart attack. I would see, things in my visions that I couldn't understand, that were really frightening, terrifying. Luckily, I had really good support, and same in the Amazon, really good support. You're probably going to pick up a lot of thunder on this call. We're in the middle of a torrential downpour right now, so hopefully the audio isn't impacted too badly.
It'll probably just add more epicness to the conversation.
Yeah.
What is purging in an ayahuasca ceremony?
It's an energetic thing, it's like, the best way to reference it is what my teacher shares, is like, you drink the medicine and the medicine begins to clean you. And a lot of our serotonin receptors are in our stomach, and ayahuasca, and dimethyltryptamine, the active component in ayahuasca that's psychedelic, it has an effect on these receptors, and so it can cause, mild nausea, vomiting. But it's not like vomiting or purging where you're drunk and you're, sick, or, for people who are familiar with opioids, being dope sick. It's not that level of sickness. It actually feels really good. It's very relieving, to have this feeling. Sometimes it's accompanied by thoughts. One example is I was thinking about, childhood trauma that I had suffered, and I became very overwhelmed. And so what ended up happening is I started to purge into my bucket, just throwing up, blah, blah. And then as I was doing so, I was actually watching in my mind, this sadness and this trauma come out with that, with that recall of these traumatic events in my childhood. And it brought about an incredible amount of relief for me, actually. So that's the purging aspect. Generally we have 3 to 4 hours prior to ceremony where we don't drink any fluids, we don't eat any food. The stomach is pretty empty, so you're drinking maybe 10 to 25 milliliters of the ayahuasca brew. So when a purge comes on, if you follow the protocol, and you don't have a full stomach when you come to ceremony, it's pretty gentle.
Why is ayahuasca a tricky plant medicine to serve?
Yeah, there's many reasons behind that. Serving ayahuasca, unlike other psychedelics, is rather complicated, actually, because it can be dangerous. The MAOI inhibitor that is part of the ayahuasca vine comes with a lot of contraindications. There's a lot of medications that you cannot be on. There's even foods that you're not supposed to eat before drinking ayahuasca. They can lead to elevated blood pressure. They can lead to serotonin syndrome. It can be really problematic and potentially life-threatening. So a lot of precautions are taken prior to administering ayahuasca to anybody. And we really do our diligence. We really make sure that people are medically fit, medically sound, mentally fit, mentally sound. They know what they're about to embark on. And we begin with a very low dose. So we ease people into the process. It's never about, seeing how far we can push it or seeing how far we can push somebody. We take all the steps to make it as gentle and as graceful and as peaceful as it possibly can, because we don't want people to become afraid. And so, we take our time and we make sure that we do it in a good way that's safe and where people feel, comfortable moving into what they're about to move into in terms of interpersonal work.
How do you become qualified to serve medicine like ayahuasca?
Yeah, that's also, a really important question. And ayahuasca is, not just specific to the Shipibo tradition. There are many other traditions in South America that work with ayahuasca in various degrees, different cultures, different tribal lineages, different countries. And so, getting to a place where you can serve ayahuasca, I was taught in a very traditional way. In the Shipibo tradition, you're recommended to have a minimum of 1 year of dietas. That's to say you are, connected with these plants. There's a strict isolation process. There's a strict dietary protocol. No sex, no self-pleasure, no news, no fruit, no salt, no sugar. no alcohol, all of these things. So yeah, it's strict, right? That's the Shipibo tradition. And then in terms of, being qualified to work with ayahuasca, it's like that's really a question for people themselves. And when I got into this work and doing this, the main reason I wanted to come to Niue Rao and begin to learn was actually just so that I could be totally autonomous and work with ayahuasca myself and not have to be reliant on, the psychotherapist that I was sitting with medicine in Canada. And so I came and I learned from a very well-known, reputable Shipibo teacher, Maestro Ricardo Amaringo, at his center, Niue Rao Centro Espiritual. And my focus just became my own healing, overcoming my own trauma, overcoming my own shadow, working on becoming a better person, and essentially building capacity through my own healing and overcoming my own darkness, so that I would have the capacity and the ability to hold space for other people who are in similar difficulties that I was in my early recovery. So I think in terms of, becoming a person who can serve ayahuasca, one, it's an incredibly huge responsibility. It's not something that can be played with. It's not something that people should be ordering on the internet. It's not something that people should be doing alone unless they have a lot of experience. And yeah, that practitioners go through the necessary steps. I don't claim to be a shaman. I really don't like using that word or that term, actually. I think that, being a provider of this medicine is a real honor. It's a big responsibility and a big undertaking. And that, yeah, it requires a lot of discipline. It requires a lot of emotional maturity. It requires, doing the work. I'm still healing, right? I'm still working on myself always. There's always more, to work on and work through. And that's why I really love this peer-led model, because it's not about me being the healer. It's actually about helping people become empowered to understand that they're their own healer, and that this process is the opportunity for them to look at themselves and come up with solutions with the support of other people with lived experience to overcome whatever it is that they're trying to overcome, and essentially live the best quality of life they can possibly live, and have community and fellowship, and use these experiences to their advantage to just become better people.
What is next for you?
So I've been working on it for many years. One of the dreams that I had was to set up exactly what I have here, a peer-led recovery center in Canada. And we have acquired a property for that specific use. We have incorporated Sacred Rebels Recovery Limited, and we will be opening the doors October 1st, one of the first, if not the very first, long-term inpatient residential holistic recovery program that incorporates the use of psychedelic-assisted therapy, ayahuasca-assisted therapy, ketamine therapy, cannabis therapy. We're not 12-step. It's harm reduction focused. It's empowerment focused. There's physical fitness, holistic nutrition, boxing, jiu-jitsu, resistance training, and outdoor adventures, and travel to Peru to drink ayahuasca at Niue Rao. Part of the process for guests who will be staying with us, we'll be setting them up and getting them ready for international travel so that they can experience ayahuasca with the Shipibo community at Niue Rao, and basically continue the work that we're doing here. We have 30 acres that we are growing food on. We have local community that we employ and basically are building housing for and providing them with work for their families, and keeping everything very reciprocal. And the center that I built that's a part of Niue Rao is a donation for the Shipibo families. They're going to be inheriting the land and using the housing, using the kitchens, eating the fruit from the trees that we started planting 3 years ago. So it's very much about sharing and giving back.
Are you worried about legal ramifications?
I mean, I got to be honest with you. In terms of the law, the law that I'm most worried about are laws that continue to perpetuate the toxic drug crisis. I'm worried about the laws that hinder people to access harm reduction services, supervised consumption. I'm worried about drug policy and laws related to substance use. I'm worried that, the illicit market is going to continue to claim lives. I've lost 38 friends since 2015. So in terms of the law, that's what I'm afraid of. In terms of legal ramifications on my end, I don't feel worried at all. We'll be working with Ayahuasca in the Amazon. Guests who are residents of the program on Vancouver Island will learn about Ayahuasca. They'll participate in regulated and lawfully conducted medicine journeys with program graduates of the psychedelic certification at Vancouver Island University, physicians, psychotherapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, people who are lawfully allowed to administer psychedelics in a therapeutic setting. That will be how we move, and that will be what we do with the residents. So everything's being done lawfully. Everything's being done very carefully. The medical team and the medical board and the advisory committee that we have are next level, top tier professionals. I think there's 5 PhDs on the board. All of them participate in ayahuasca ceremonies, and we'll be doing guided international retreats to Niue Rao and other centers that we're working with. So in terms of the law, I'm not breaking any laws, and the way that the laws are currently set up right now, it's like pretty preposterous. In British Columbia, they decriminalize substances, and there's a lot of confusion about decriminalization and legalization. Currently, substances are not regulated. Illicit substances are not regulated. Legally, you're allowed to walk around with 2.5 grams of fentanyl in your pocket. That has the potential to kill 20 people, And then there's somebody like me who's like, hey guys, I'm working with plant medicine. I want to help people overcome their problematic substance use. I don't really feel like anybody's going to be able to argue with me. I'm not worried about anything. I'm worried that I'm going to lose more people that I love. And that's part of my drive in doing what I do, preventing the needless death of people who use drugs and fighting for equity, and the rights of drug users and substance users, whatever it might be. My choice has been to abstain from opioids and cocaine, and I have to do that for my own well-being. However, there's friends and people in my life that choose to use those substances, or, maybe are dependent on those substances to varying degrees. And I just want them to be able to be safe. So, there's an organization called DULF, the Drug User Liberation Front. They're based in Vancouver. They founded a compassion club, and we're providing, guests or participants with safe supply of substances to collect data on the efficacy of such a program, and it was super effective. They're fighting a constitutional challenge right now to basically hopefully change drug policy and change drug laws. And so that would be my argument too, is I'm providing a service in the midst of a toxic drug crisis, the worst public health emergency we've ever seen in our history. The leading cause of death right now for people ages 10 to 50 years old is drug overdose. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And, the public has been extremely polarized. You see the amount of people who are unhoused. We look at the socioeconomic factors, the cost of housing. We look at, the lack of employment opportunities and, varying things that happen. And then the lack of resources to support people. In British Columbia alone, there's, roughly 100,000 people estimated to struggle with some form of problematic substance use or who are on prescribed opioids. And there's 3,000 treatment beds. You've got 100,000 people struggling with substance use disorders, and there's only 3,000 beds for them to go to, So, yeah, it's a really big problem, and I'm coming home to create change and be part of the community. I have a well-established network. I've got 9 years of, my own personal lived experience, 3 years of that operating exactly what I'm going to be operating in the Peruvian Amazon. And I just play for keeps, like this is my life. This is what I'm going to do. And I don't feel worried at all, actually. I feel confident in my ability to provide this service to people and help people get their lives back.
What makes ayahuasca and other psychedelics so effective for people who are battling addictions?
I mean, there's many things that make psychedelics effective. I think, some of these substances are, empathogens. They generate, a sense of inner and outer empathy for people. They, can have, what would be more of like a spiritual effect, or feeling a communion with the creator or the universe or nature or the earth, and whatever you might want to call it, God. Some people might call it God. And they give people, a sense of peace and a sense of relief, and done with the right setting, dosage, and support, it has a profound effect, and what I've been talking about for 9 years. And, it's become a lot more popularized in the mainstream media. We see people talking more about psychedelic psychotherapy. We see more celebrities and professional athletes turning to it. And the narrative is really starting to change, right? People are starting to experience these things for themselves, and there's been 100 years of prohibition, the criminalization of people who use drugs, and we're on the frontier of watching psychedelics become legalized. We're watching that happen. Nobody thought it was going to happen with cannabis. Legalization in some ways in terms of business hasn't been the greatest, because of the way things have been. But I think, psychedelics becoming legalized and more people talking about it, I think is going to be a doorway towards the regulation and legalization of all substances. And anybody who's opposed to that, look at the data, look at the research, look at the information that's being published on the efficacy of harm reduction, and start changing the language and changing the ideas. When we see people who are unhoused and we see people using substances in the street, that's not due to a moral failing. That's not due to the result of, a person being a bad person. That is a direct result of stagnant drug policies in our country, Canada, and unresolved trauma and lack of support and resources, and a tough place to be, a tough world to live in as a human being. There's so much responsibility, the cost of living, the cost of housing, the cost of education. It's hard, and people often end up turning to something to cope. And sadly, right now, we have drugs that are deliberately being poisoned with, toxic substances or dangerous substances in very high concentrations, like fentanyl and xylazine and, some of these other veterinary anesthetics that are being put into the drugs, and they're killing people. They're killing people. And interestingly enough, people who use substances and drugs on the street, they respond to the most overdoses. We did a data collection challenge on this topic of, overdose response. People who use substances respond to the most overdoses, and most of the time they don't call 911. The people who are dying from fatal drug overdoses are often, people who are working jobs. The construction industry and the oil and gas industry and any of the trades has been hit especially hard, because people don't have a tolerance to some of these substances. A guy gets a bag of cocaine or gets a pill that he thinks is Percocet, for example, and it's actually, it's a counterfeit, and it's got fentanyl in it. Just enough fentanyl to cause them to stop breathing. You stop breathing for 3 minutes, you're gone. Nobody's there to help you. Nobody knows what's going on. Like, that's what's happening right now. So, there's a lot of anger. We hear people talking about drug users in public and all these junkies on the street and this and that. Talk to the government about it. The government is the one who's responsible to come up with solutions. And in the meantime, people who use substances, people who come from a place of lived experience, we have solutions. We're providing the solutions. We're doing it. We're the experts. Listen to us. Listen to us and what we're doing to help create change and, provide people with long-term sustainable solutions. If somebody wants to use whatever the illicit substance might be, somebody wants to use fentanyl, how can we help them stay safe? That's the question. How can we help them, stay safe so that they don't have to lose their lives? The other benefit to regulating substances is eliminating organized crime. You know, we look at violence in Canada and statistics that have to do with violence and substance-related crime. You know, I would say probably 90% of people who are incarcerated right now, it's substance-related one way or another. You know, why is that, right? If substances were regulated and people knew what they were getting, they could go in to buy it from a store like they do alcohol, tobacco, or cannabis, I think things would be a lot different. You know, and some people might want to argue that, and my argument is like, well, you haven't seen it happen. So how can you know that it won't work? You know, we know that it'll work. We have data suggesting that it does effectively, right? So it's very nuanced, it's very complicated, you know, there's so many, you know, things to it, but the reality of it is until we see a safe and regulated supply of all substances, people are going to continue to die at an alarming rate. And, you know, they say every 11 seconds, somebody dies from a fentanyl overdose in the United States. Every 4 seconds, somebody does an illicit substance for their first time. You know, 8 people a day die in British Columbia from a fentanyl overdose. 20 people a day use an illicit substance for their first time. You know, so you do the math, like this isn't going away. You know, it's not going away. It's only going to continue to get worse. And psychedelic therapy shows promise in being able to address some of these issues and give people the support that they need, especially when it's done with the right people.
Last question for you. Why recover? Why transform?
That's a personal question. That's a personal decision that people have to come to for themselves. I don't push it on anybody. You know, for example, like you have to convince me that this is what you want to do. You know, I don't care if your mom and your dad or, you know, whoever is going to pay the money to send you to come and work with me. That doesn't interest me at all. You know, I want to know that this is what a person wants. You know, you have to convince me and be committed and show up. I want to make change. I'm ready. I need to do this for me. It can't be for your wife. It can't be for your girlfriend. It can't be because you're going to lose your job or because you're going to go to jail. No. You have to want to do it for yourself. You have to show up. You have to do the work. You have to participate. And I just don't play games with people. You know, it's like I have a really high enrollment success rate. People who enroll in the program have really exceptional transformations and long-term success. And that's because I'm really careful who I let in. I want to be able to say yes to everybody, but the reality is like, if you come to me and you treat it like it's a holiday and it's a vacation and you don't do the work and you just want to drink ayahuasca and you're not going to participate in the program and all the other activities to actually get well, most likely not a whole lot's going to change, you know. And one of the problems that I see is, you know, these addiction retreats, you know, quote unquote addiction retreats, 4 days, you're going to do iboga and there's no follow-up or very little follow-up. There's no integrative work. You know, it's just people go, they have their psychedelic experience over the course of a week, and then they go back to their lives, you know, and they go back to the same environments, the same people, the same destructive patterns, and they go back to using, you know. And so my role and my responsibility and my commitment to individuals who come to work with me is I want to make it so that that doesn't happen, you know. And how we get there is by doing the program work. I work with Recovery Dharma, Smart Recovery, Psychedelics in Recovery. You know, I give people the opportunity to explore everything. You want to explore AA? Okay, sure. Explore AA. You want to explore NA? Sure. You know, what is it about you that feels like, you know, this is what you want to do or this is the path you want to choose? And I just guide them towards that and I support them in that. And I teach them about nutrition, physical exercise, meditation, breath work, yoga. They get massage therapy, acupuncture, you know, all of these other things. And then they're supported by a somatic experiencing coach, a psychotherapist, other people with lived experience, participate in in-person and online meetings. It's as well-rounded as it gets. You know, it's a lot different than most conventional treatment centers where you walk in the door, a doctor starts shoving pills down your mouth and you're sitting in a room, you know, eating chocolate cake, drinking Red Bull, smoking cigarettes. I'm not doing that. You know, that's not what this is. You know, so it's like, you show up, you're determined, you've convinced me that this is what you want to do, you're prepared thoroughly for the experiences that you're about to go through, and you're supported from start to finish And even once program guest leaves, I'm in touch with them. You know, we have weekly phone calls, we have weekly meetings, you know, people stay connected. And that's what recovering from problematic substance use is. It's about having connection, being empowered, making lasting change, and committing yourself to that.
Turning the rat cage into a rat park.
Exactly. Disneyland for drug addicts, if you will.
Well, super exciting time that we live in. I'm super proud to hear from another Canadian who is changing our society, and I'm really excited for what comes in the future for you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.